You don't ease into this moment. You're interrupted by it. Whatever you were doing seconds ago loses its weight, like background noise fading when someone calls your name with urgency you can't ignore. You pause, mid-scroll, mid-thought, mid-breath, because something inside you knows this isn't random. This isn't just another set of words drifting past your eyes. This moment reaches out and grips you, asking for your full attention, asking you to stop running for just a heartbeat and see. You've been carrying something heavy for a long time. It sits in your chest, sometimes quiet, sometimes loud enough to steal your sleep. You rarely talk about it the way it truly feels because explaining it would require reopening wounds you've learned to manage. It's the ache of loving someone so deeply that their struggle feels like your own. It's the silent fear that creeps in when the house is quiet, when your mind replays conversations, choices, signs you wonder if you missed. It's the question you never say out loud but ask anyway. Will things ever change? Right now, you're being asked to stop everything. Not because you're failing, not because you haven't done enough, but because something is about to shift, and you need to witness the beginning of it. This moment doesn't come wrapped in fireworks or loud declarations. It arrives quietly, the way the most important moments often do. A stillness settles over you, and in that stillness, hope begins to rise. Not the fragile kind that breaks easily, but the steady kind that stands even when circumstances haven't caught up yet. You've prayed from exhaustion before. Not polished prayers, not eloquent words, just raw, desperate whispers sent into the dark because that's all you had left. You've pleaded, bargained, cried, waited. You've watched time move forward while answers seem to stay still. And yet, somehow you're still here, still believing even when belief felt unreasonable, still loving even when love hurt. That alone tells a story about you. This interruption isn't here to shame your doubts or minimize your pain. It's here to meet you exactly where you are, right now. Not the stronger version of you that people think you are, not the hopeful version you try to be for everyone else. You, the one who has worried quietly, the one who has blamed yourself on nights you couldn't sleep, the one who has asked more than once if you did something wrong. You didn't. Sometimes love feels powerless. Not because it is, but because it works in ways you can't always see. You've been looking for evidence in the visible world, measuring progress by behavior, conversations, outcomes. But there are movements that begin long before they show themselves. There are shifts that start beneath the surface, where roots form before anything breaks through the soil. What you're experiencing right now is the first tremor of something that's been building quietly, patiently, intentionally. You were drawn here because your heart is already tuned to this frequency, even if you don't fully understand why you stopped, why you're still reading, why something in you feels alert and tender at the same time. You're responding to a signal meant specifically for you. This isn't about coincidence. It's about timing. And timing, when it finally arrives, doesn't ask for permission. There's a reason this moment feels different. You've read encouraging words before. You've heard promises, reassurances, advice. Some helped for a while, some faded quickly. But this feels like someone knocking gently but firmly on the door of your spirit, saying, "Pay attention. Something important begins here." You've been standing at the edge of hope, afraid to step fully into it because disappointment has trained you to be cautious. Hope has felt risky, vulnerable, almost irresponsible at times. But what if the risk isn't hoping again? What if the real risk has always been giving up right before the shift, right before the turn you couldn't see yet? Take a breath, not the shallow kind you take when you're bracing for bad news, but a deep one. The kind that reaches places inside you that have been tense for far too long. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. You don't have to solve anything right now. You don't have to fix anyone. You're not being asked to fight, explain, or convince. You're being asked to receive. There are moments in life that act like hinges. Small, almost invisible, but everything swings on them afterward. This is one of those moments. You might not fully grasp it yet, and that's okay. Understanding often comes later. What matters now is that you're present, that you didn't scroll past, that you listened to the quiet pull that told you to stop. You've carried responsibility like armor, believing that if you stayed vigilant enough, worried enough, prayed hard enough, you could somehow control the outcome. But control was never your assignment. Love was, faith was, endurance was, and you've shown all three, even when you didn't feel strong. Right now, something is being set in motion that doesn't require your strain, only your trust. Trust doesn't mean pretending everything is fine. It means allowing yourself to believe that unseen work can be just as real as visible struggle. It means accepting that timing doesn't invalidate your prayers, it fulfills them. This interruption is gentle, but it's firm. It says, don't rush past this. Don't minimize it. Don't talk yourself out of hope. You're not here by accident. And this moment isn't here to tease you. It's here to mark the beginning of a turning point. One that starts not with dramatic proof, but with a quiet assurance settling into your bones. You don't need to do anything extraordinary right now. Just stay. Stay present. Stay open. Let this moment remind you that even after long seasons of waiting, movement can begin in an instant. And when it does, it often starts exactly like this: unexpected, unannounced, and undeniable. Something has interrupted you for a reason, and this is only the beginning. Once the interruption settles, a deeper awareness begins to unfold. It's subtle at first, like realizing you're not alone in a room you thought was empty. You sense movement, not around you, but for you. Not pressure, not demand, alignment. The kind that feels intentional, precise, and calm. You begin to understand that what's happening isn't emotional coincidence or wishful thinking. It's coordination. You've spent so much time focusing on what you can see. The behaviors that worry you, the distance that hurts, the silence that feels louder than words. But beyond your line of sight there has been activity. Not chaotic scrambling, not reactionary fixing. Deliberate motion with purpose. You are not the only one invested in this outcome. You never were. Think of the moments that could have gone differently but didn't. Decisions that somehow paused just long enough. Turns that were almost taken but weren't. Close calls you only realized after the fact. At the time, you might have chalked them up to luck, chance, or coincidence. But now, with a clearer lens, you see the pattern forming. Protection doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it simply prevents disaster and leaves no signature behind. What you're sensing now is that protection has shifted into preparation. There comes a point when guarding the edges is no longer enough, when the focus moves from preservation to positioning. That's where things are now. The atmosphere surrounding this situation is changing, not in noise, but in direction. The resistance you felt, the tension that seemed to stall everything, is losing its leverage. Not because force was applied, but because authority has arrived. You felt helpless before. You've stood on the outside wanting to intervene but knowing you couldn't control another person's choices. That helplessness was never a flaw in you. It was a reminder of where your influence ends and something greater begins. And now, that greater force is stepping forward, not to override free will, but to illuminate it. You might wonder why it took so long, why the struggle had to stretch the way it did, why growth couldn't come without pain. The answer isn't punishment or neglect, it's depth. Some transformations require tension to build so that when change finally comes, it's strong enough to last. Shallow change snaps under pressure. Deep change reshapes identity. Behind the scenes, timing has been calibrated with precision you couldn't have managed even if you tried. Conversations delayed on purpose. Opportunities withheld until readiness matched responsibility. Distractions allowed to exhaust themselves. Every delay carried intention, even when it felt unbearable from your side of the weight. You are beginning to realize something important. What you thought was absence was actually restraint. What felt like silence was discernment. There were moments when intervention would have felt comforting but would have robbed the outcome of its power. Growth that's rushed rarely roots. This was never about speed. It was about stability. As this awareness settles in, something inside you relaxes. Not because all the answers are suddenly clear, but because the weight of soul responsibility lifts. You were never meant to carry this alone. You were meant to care deeply, pray honestly, and remain present, but not to orchestrate outcomes beyond your reach. Now, momentum is building. Not frantic momentum, the focused kind. The kind that doesn't need your panic to fuel it. The kind that moves forward even while you sleep. You might not see dramatic changes overnight, but you'll begin to notice subtle shifts. Tone softening, resistance weakening, curiosity replacing defensiveness. Seeds of reflection being planted where walls once stood. This isn't manipulation, it's invitation. Something is stirring in the inner landscape you can't access directly. Questions are being raised that can't be ignored. Old narratives are losing credibility. Justifications that once felt solid are beginning to feel hollow. And when that happens, a person doesn't need to be pushed. They begin to turn on their own. You've learned, through hard experience, that pressure only hardens resistance. What's happening now works differently. It applies clarity instead of force, light instead of argument, understanding instead of fear. That's why it's effective, and that's why it lasts. You may notice a strange mix of emotions rising in you. Relief paired with caution, hope tempered by memory. That's natural. You've been here long enough to know not every emotional high leads somewhere real. But this isn't an emotional spike, it's a structural shift. And structural shifts don't announce themselves loudly. They change the foundation quietly until everything above them must adjust. What's being mobilized now is not about proving anything to you. It's about creating conditions where change becomes possible, then inevitable. Paths are aligning. Encounters are being timed. Insight is being positioned to land when it can actually be received. Not earlier, not later. And here's what matters most. This movement doesn't require you to convince, argue, or chase. In fact, your role right now is simpler and harder than that. You're being asked to trust the process enough not to interfere with it, to remain steady instead of reactive, to speak with intention instead of desperation, to respond from confidence instead of fear. That doesn't mean disengaging emotionally. It means engaging wisely. It means understanding that sometimes the most powerful support is calm presence, not constant correction. That your peace can become a mirror reflecting what stability looks like. You are not waiting anymore. Waiting implies stillness without progress. This is transition. And transition feels disorienting because the old hasn't fully left and the new hasn't fully arrived. But movement is happening, and it's happening in the right order. Take another breath. Let this awareness settle fully. You're not late, you didn't miss anything. You didn't fail. You were positioned exactly where you needed to be for this phase to begin. Something has been mobilized, and now it's moving forward with purpose. As momentum builds, you start noticing patterns you once brushed aside. Numbers, moments, repetitions, small details that refuse to stay small. They appear when you're not looking for them, when your guard is down, when your mind is elsewhere. At first, you tell yourself it's coincidence. The brain likes patterns, you reason. But after a while, coincidence stops explaining the timing, the precision, the way these signs seem to arrive exactly when your resolve wavers. You glance at a clock without meaning to, and the same sequence greets you again. A receipt lands in your hand carrying the same quiet message. A passing license plate, a phone number, an address. There it is, repeated, insistent, gentle, but firm. These moments don't shout, they whisper, and whispers require attention. What's happening isn't superstition or imagination. It's reassurance translated into a language the anxious mind can receive. When hope has been bruised too many times, it stops responding to abstract promises. It needs confirmation, tangible reminders. Anchors that say, "You're not imagining this. Stay steady." These signs aren't commands. They don't tell you what to do. They remind you of what's already in motion. Think of them like mile markers on a long road, proof that movement is happening even when the scenery hasn't changed yet. You may still feel surrounded by the same questions, but the markers confirm you're not standing still. You begin to understand that transformation rarely announces itself with drama. More often, it leaves breadcrumbs. It reassures before it reveals. It strengthens resolve before it demands courage. These repeating signs are not meant to replace faith. They're meant to support it, especially when faith feels thin. Your mind starts connecting dots backward. You recall moments when you felt nudged to say something and didn't. Times you almost gave up praying, almost stopped believing change was possible, but something kept you going anyway. That something wasn't stubbornness. It was guidance working beneath conscious thought, keeping you aligned even when you felt lost. There's comfort in realizing you weren't holding everything together by sheer will. That unseen reinforcement has been present, quietly stabilizing you so you didn't collapse under the weight of waiting. The signs you're noticing now aren't new. They're simply becoming visible because you're finally in a position to see them. You might notice that these moments often arrive when you're tired, when the old doubts resurface, when your inner dialogue starts revisiting worst-case scenarios. That's not accidental. Reassurance often arrives exactly where fear tries to regain control. It doesn't erase fear, it interrupts it. What changes now is your response. Instead of dismissing these signs, you allow them to land. You don't overanalyze them or assign rigid meaning. You simply receive them as confirmation that you're still aligned, still seen, still supported. That posture, open but grounded, creates space for clarity. And clarity begins to emerge, not as a sudden revelation, but as a quiet knowing. You start feeling less frantic about outcomes, less compelled to force conversations or demand proof. The urgency that once drove you begins to soften, replaced by something steadier. Expectation without pressure. This shift matters more than you realize. When desperation fades, discernment strengthens. When anxiety loosens its grip, wisdom steps forward. You begin sensing when to speak and when to remain silent, when to act and when to wait. Your responses become more intentional, less reactive. That alone changes the emotional climate surrounding you. The signs keep appearing, but now they feel different. Less like questions, more like confirmation. Less like reassurance you beg for, more like acknowledgement you recognize. You're no longer searching for meaning. You're witnessing alignment. You may even notice changes in yourself before you notice them anywhere else. Your sleep improves slightly. Your thoughts stop racing as much. You catch yourself imagining positive outcomes without immediately correcting yourself. That's not denial. That's permission returning. You begin to trust that not every step needs to be visible to be valid. That progress doesn't always look like improvement at first. It often looks like awareness, like discomfort that leads to honesty, like questions that dismantle old assumptions. These internal shifts are often the truest signs that something real is happening. You also realize something else. Signs don't create change. They confirm readiness for it. They show up when resistance is lowering, when defenses are tiring, when openness is becoming possible. They don't force the door open, they signal that the lock is already turning. That understanding calms you further. You're not waiting for a miracle to drop out of the sky. You're watching a process unfold that respects timing, choice, and growth. One that builds strength instead of dependency. One that allows transformation to come from the inside out. You no longer feel the need to convince yourself this is real. The consistency speaks for itself. And consistency, unlike hype, holds weight. It doesn't rush you. It doesn't demand belief. It simply stays. These signs are not asking you to fix anything. They're asking you to stay present, to remain open, to keep your heart soft even while you stay grounded. to remember that change often begins long before it becomes visible. And as you hold that posture, steady, aware, receptive, you realize something profound. Reassurance has been surrounding you for longer than you knew. You're just finally in a place to recognize it. The signs aren't the destination. They're the confirmation that you're on the right path, and that transformation is no longer theoretical. It's already underway. There comes a moment when resistance simply runs out of energy. Not because it's defeated in a dramatic clash, but because it can no longer sustain itself. That's the phase unfolding now. What once felt immovable, patterns, habits, reactions, cycles that repeated no matter how much you hoped otherwise, begins to weaken from the inside. You don't see it collapse all at once. You notice it losing authority. Its grip loosens. Its voice grows quieter. You've lived through seasons where it felt like nothing changed, no matter how much effort you invested. You tried patience. You tried reasoning. You tried silence. You tried prayer spoken calmly and prayer spoken through tears. At times, it felt as though every attempt was met with the same result, and that repetition trained your expectations downward. You learned not to hope too loudly, not to imagine too far ahead. You learned to brace. What's happening now doesn't ask you to brace anymore. This phase isn't about conflict, it's about conclusion. Certain dynamics have reached their limit. They've played out every variation they could, they've exhausted their influence. And when something has nothing left to teach, it begins to dissolve. Not explosively, inevitably. You might feel this as a strange stillness where tension used to live. The arguments you rehearsed in your mind don't feel as necessary. The urge to correct, confront, or convince fades. It's not apathy, it's clarity. You're realizing that some battles were never yours to win, only yours to outlast. Old cycles thrive on reaction. They need fuel, fear, urgency, emotional escalation. When that fuel is removed, the cycle can't continue. What's shifting now is not behavior alone, but the underlying structure that supported it. And when structure changes, outcomes must follow. There's also something else happening, something tender. Restoration doesn't just arrive to fix what's broken, it reintroduces what was lost. Trust begins to peek through cracks that once held only suspicion. Softness appears where defensiveness once ruled. Curiosity replaces certainty. Questions replace avoidance. You might not see this immediately on the surface. In fact, restoration often begins invisibly, where no one can perform it or fake it. It starts in the private moments, when someone is alone with their thoughts, when the noise fades, when honesty becomes unavoidable. That's where real change is born. You're also being restored. You've carried guilt that was never meant to be yours. You've replayed decisions, wondering if a different choice would have led to a different outcome. You've judged yourself harshly for moments of exhaustion, frustration, or silence. But as this phase unfolds, a truth settles in gently. You were faithful with what you were given. You responded with love, even when love cost you comfort. Restoration doesn't rewrite the past, it reframes it. It shows you that what felt like failure was often endurance, that what felt like weakness was persistence, that what felt like letting go was sometimes the only way to allow growth to happen. As old cycles lose their power, grace steps forward, not as indulgence, but as strength. Grace doesn't ignore responsibility. It makes responsibility possible. It removes the weight of shame so growth can actually occur. Shame freezes. Grace mobilizes. This is why change accelerates now. Not because pressure increases, but because grace creates space. Space to think clearly. Space to choose differently. Space to imagine a future that isn't defined by past mistakes. Space to become someone new without being haunted by who you used to be. You may notice moments of insight emerging unexpectedly. Realizations that don't come from lectures or arguments, but from lived experience finally making sense. As wisdom forming, not imposed, earned. And earned wisdom tends to last. As this happens, your role shifts again. You're no longer guarding against collapse, you're preparing for renewal. That requires a different posture. Less vigilance, more openness, less fear of disappointment, more willingness to recognize progress even when it's imperfect. Restoration rarely follows a straight line. There may still be hesitation. There may still be moments of regression. But the direction has changed, and direction matters more than speed. When momentum points forward, even pauses serve a purpose. You might feel grief surface unexpectedly, not because things are getting worse, but because you're finally safe enough to feel what you've been holding in. Grief is not a setback here. It's a release. It marks the end of survival mode and the beginning of healing. And healing doesn't erase scars, it integrates them. It turns them into reminders of strength rather than symbols of failure. It allows you to look back without being pulled backward. What's ending now isn't just a season, it's a narrative. The story that said nothing would change. The belief that this was as good as it would get. The assumption that hope was naive. Those stories are losing credibility. They can't survive in the presence of evidence that something new is forming. You don't need to announce this shift. You don't need to defend it. You don't need to convince anyone it's real. Restoration works best when it's allowed to unfold without performance. Quiet change tends to be the deepest kind. Stand here for a moment and recognize it. Something old is finishing, and something new is stabilizing. Not in theory, not someday. Now, the weight you carried is beginning to lift, not because the journey is over, but because you're no longer walking against the current. Grace has taken the lead, and resistance no longer has the final word. What once felt endless is concluding, and what begins next is built to last. A new kind of morning is approaching, not one marked by instant answers or dramatic announcements, but one defined by certainty that settles deeper than emotion. You feel it before you can explain it. The air feels lighter, not because everything is resolved, but because the direction is clear. You're no longer standing in limbo, waiting for proof that hope is justified. Hope has already justified itself by surviving everything that tried to extinguish it. This is where faith matures, when it no longer needs urgency to stay alive. You step into this new phase differently than you entered the last one. You're not desperate for signs anymore. You're not bracing for disappointment. You're attentive, steady, present. You've learned that rushing outcomes doesn't accelerate them, and forcing clarity often delays it. Now, you move with intention instead of anxiety, with confidence instead of control. What seals this shift isn't something external, it's internal alignment. In a way that doesn't require validation, that something irreversible has begun. Not everything will change overnight, but everything will change from here. The trajectory has altered. The future is no longer a repetition of the past. You may still have moments of doubt. That doesn't disqualify you. Doubt isn't the opposite of faith. It's often evidence that faith is stretching into new territory. The difference now is that doubt no longer drives you. It passes through without taking the wheel. You're learning how to hold expectation gently, not gripping it so tightly that it fractures, not loosening it so much that it disappears. This balance is wisdom. It allows you to remain open without becoming fragile, hopeful without becoming naive. You also begin to see yourself differently. You're no longer defined by how well you manage outcomes you were never meant to control. You're defined by your consistency, your endurance, your willingness to keep your heart open when closing it would have been easier. You didn't abandon love when it became painful. You didn't harden when disappointment tried to teach you to. That matters more than you know. This new dawn isn't just about someone else's transformation. It's about yours. You're stepping out of survival mode and into stewardship. Stewardship of peace. Stewardship of trust. Stewardship of words spoken with intention rather than fear. What you carry now influences the environment around you more than you realize. You may notice your language shifting. You speak with less finality about setbacks. You stop declaring things always or never. You leave room for growth, even when you don't yet see it. That room becomes a sanctuary where change can land without being interrogated. You also begin to recognize opportunities you would have missed before. Moments to encourage instead of correct. Moments to listen instead of react. Moments to bless instead of brace. These aren't small choices. They're formative ones. They shape what comes next. This phase asks you to walk forward without constantly looking back to measure distance traveled. Progress isn't always obvious in reflection. Sometimes it's only visible when you notice how differently you respond to what used to overwhelm you. Calm where there was panic. Patience where there was urgency. Trust where there was fear. Those shifts are not accidental. They are evidence. You may still carry memories of how hard it was. Those memories don't disappear, but they lose their power to define your expectations. Instead, they become markers of resilience, proof that you can survive uncertainty without losing yourself. As you move forward, you'll notice doors opening quietly, conversations that feel easier, opportunities that don't require force, alignment that doesn't demand explanation. You won't need to chase these moments. They'll meet you where you are because you're finally positioned to receive them. This is what it means to be sealed in faith, not frozen in belief, but anchored in trust. Trust that doesn't collapse when timelines shift. Trust that doesn't disappear when outcomes take time. Trust that allows you to live fully in the present without fearing the future. You are not standing at the end of the story. You're standing at the threshold of a new chapter, one written with greater clarity, deeper compassion, and steadier hope. The foundation beneath you has changed, and foundations determine everything built on top of them. Take this final moment to acknowledge it. You stayed. You didn't scroll past. You didn't shut down. You allowed yourself to believe again, even after disappointment tried to teach you otherwise. That choice matters. It always has. As you step forward from here, carry this with you. Not as pressure, not as expectation, but as quiet confidence. You don't need to announce what's coming. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. Let the unfolding speak for itself. This dawn is real. This shift is lasting. And what begins now is not fragile. It's grounded. You move forward not wondering if things will change, but knowing they already have. And this is only the beginning.